So here we are at our Dip and Slush Plastisol station. We call this the Plastisol station because the material that we use is called Plastisol. And you can see there, it's really a thick material. This one's colored in pink. I've got blue and purple and green and red. Now what the Plastisol is finely ground up PVC, or polyvinyl chloride, in a plasticizer. And a plasticizer is a chemical that will improve the workability of the PVC plastic. So essentially what we have here is a plastic that's liquid at room temperature, but when we heat it up, it's going to undergo a chemical reaction and create an infusible solid. All right? So we're going to make a doorstop with slush casting. We're going to make a coin case with dip coating. We're going to make a ice scraper handle with dip coating. And we're going to dip coat a set of tool handles. Okay, these things have been preheating for a couple of hours. And you'll see various molds in here. Let's start with our coin case mold. And I very carefully want to remove the coin case mold from the oven. Let's keep that door closed to hold that heat in there. I'm going to dip this into the PVC Plastisol. I'm going to rest my pliers on the can, and I want to give this at least 2 minutes. During that 2 minutes, the Plastisol is becoming a solid as it fuses around the hot mold. After a few minutes, the mold is no longer hot enough to fuse Plastisol, so 2 minutes ought to be good. Alright, so we've had this in there for about 2 minutes. If I just quickly go over to the oven, I'm going to have a problem. My challenge to you is to hold this here until it no longer drips. You'll see it run off of there for a while. You'll see it start to drip off of the mold. And what we want to watch for is that very last drip to sag and then return back to the mold. If I put this in the oven now, that last drip is going to solidify as a drip on my coin case. We need to return this to the oven to fuse the outside of this PVC Plastisol. So carefully hook that into the oven. Try not to hit any other molds. And that's going to need to be back in that oven for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. The dip molded coin case has been in the oven for 15 minutes. I can tell that it's ready to come out of there. I can take this downstairs and go right into cold water in the sink. My coin case can go right into cold water. We'll cool that off good, and then we'll remove that off of the mold. On molding of my dip molding coin case, 2 steps. I'm going to set the X-Acto knife right at where the stem of the hook meets the mold. We're going to separate that. And now I want a straight line from the stem to the bottom of the mold. So I'm going to use a straight edge. X-Acto knife against the PVC Plastisol, right to the bottom of the mold and stop. Now I can open this up and peel it away from the mold. And there's our PVC polyvinyl chloride Plastisol, flexible material, very abrasion resistant, very wear resistant coin case. Let's take a look at slush casting. Now slush casting is different from dip molding. With dip molding, we use a male mold and dip it into the Plastisol. With slush casting, we're going to take a female mold and cast or pour the Plastisol into the mold. And then we're also going to slush it back before we return it to the oven. Let's see that process. I'm going to do a slush casting of a doorstop. This doorstop is really hot. I just want to use a little bit of mold release so we can remove our product. And let's make a purple doorstop. So here's my casting. Pouring of a liquid plastic into a suitable mold. I want to cast it till it's almost full. I'm going to try not to spill. And as heat is penetrating from that mold through that PVC Plastisol, it's starting to solidify the walls of that mold. With slush casting, ultimately we want a hollow product. So I'm going to let this sit for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'm going to slush it back into the can to create a hollow mold. So it's been about 3 minutes, and here's what makes slush casting, slush casting. 2 words, slush casting. We already did the casting, now we're going to do the slushing. Mold's hot, it's been about 3 minutes. There's my can of Plastisol, and I'm going to slush this back into the can. You see now I have a hollow product, and now I'm going to put this into the oven to fuse this part that's not against the mold. I'm going to return that mold into the oven, 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll be able to remove that product. My slush casting of my doorstop has been in the oven for 15 minutes. It's ready to remove. I'm going to need a glove. It's too big to grab with the pliers. This can go right down into the cold water of the sink. Hot potato, hot potato. I found a dustpan upstairs to cool off my slush casting of my doorstop. Here we have our slush casting of our doorstop. After that's cooled off, the doorstop should be pretty easy to remove. You can see here I have a little extra material. Remember, we call that flash. Cut down against the table. We're going to remove that flash. PVC Plastisol is very tough. I need to be careful when I cut it. There's my finished flexible doorstop. I can write my name right in there with a permanent marker and turn that in for grading. Another dip coating product is the ice scraper handle. You're going to make the ice scraper. I don't want to grade an ice scraper handle. I want to grade a finished ice scraper. But the first part of making the finished ice scraper is to make the PVC Plastisol handle. I'm going to grab an ice scraper mold. I do want to spray a little bit of mold release on this because I definitely want to remove this product from the mold. And you'll notice a line right here. That's our dipping mark. Let's get a close look at me dipping my ice scraper handle up to that line in this mixed pink and purple Plastisol. I want to hold right at that line. I'm going to hold this as steady as I possibly can for 2 to 3 minutes. I'm using my fingers here to help hold me at the perfect height. My arm was definitely getting a little tired, getting close to 2 minutes. But I'm ready to withdraw this mold. And again, the biggest thing I have to overcome is drips on the bottom. So I'm going to pull out my mold. And here we probably want to hold it for close to a minute again as well before we return it to the oven. I do not want to see solidified drops on the bottom of your ice scraper handle. The drips have stopped. This goes into the oven, 15 to 20 minutes. Be very careful not to bump it into another product as you put it in the oven. I pulled out my handle for my ice scraper. Again, we're going to cool that off. The project is not an ice scraper handle, it is an ice scraper. So after I get this cooled off, because I use mold release, I should be able to peel that off of there pretty easily. And there's my ice scraper handle. Let's make an ice scraper. Alright, so here's my handle. We're not turning in a handle, we're turning in a finished product. So I need to make a blade for this. I'm going to find a block or a chunk of clear acrylic. This is 1/4 inch acrylic. You should also find a template where we can trace onto the acrylic. The acrylic will sometimes, you'll notice a protective layer. Just a film, plastic film protective layer. We want to peel that off of there. Once I have the protective film peeled off of there, I'm going to take this template and trace it. Okay? So what I might do is line up the long edge so I have a little less cutting to do over at the bandsaw. Cut there across the top. Hold this in position. Mark a side down the side. And a little bit there at the bottom. We're going to cut on those lines using the bandsaw. The bandsaw is essentially just that. It's a blade that's a band all the way around, and it's going to always cut in the downward motion. A couple safety things about the bandsaw: never have your hands in line with the blade. I'm going to keep my hands off to the side. Let's do this cut here first. Now I'm going to cut along my long edge, up to my line, but not cutting over my line. You see I left my line. We're going to finish this off over in the wood shop in the large combo sander. So what I currently have is a rough idea of what this is going to look like. If I force this into here, I can feel it starting to expand here, and I'm still about an inch shy of going all the way down to the bottom of the sleeve. So I could rip this. So I want to make this a little narrower, and you can see that that makes sense because I still need to sand up to my line. So I'm going to turn on the belt sander. It's going to spin that way, and I'm going to hold this and sand up to my line. You'll notice that I kind of gave this a little bit of an angle front and back to get that melted plastic off of there. Let's take a look at the width and how we're doing. It's very close to the bottom. Close enough where I think I can press it the rest of the way in. I'm going to put a lot of weight on there, and I'm going to push that down, and I can tell that that is all the way to the bottom, and it's in there good. Now we got to put a blade on this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hold this at an angle, and push that down until we sharpen a blade onto the front of this. When I do that, I'm going to have a lot of melted acrylic. It's going to be sticky and hot, so I don't want to touch that. So there's a big roll up of hot melted acrylic. I'm going to let that cool off for just a second. And I should be able to just easily remove that off of there. As that becomes a solid, it'll become brittle, and I can break that right off of there. So there you have it, an ice scraper. Not just the handle out of PVC vinyl plastisol, and the blade out of acrylic. Sharpened to a nice straight edge, sits in your door panel real neat. Turn that in for grading. Another dip coating process here is to dip coat a set of tool handles. I've asked students to bring in their own tool, something that's bare metal, doesn't have any plastic pieces, can be in the oven for a few hours, okay, and also doesn't need the handle to be able to use the tool. Some students have brought in a vice grips. If you've ever used the vice grips, the handle is part of how the tool functions. A simple slip joint pliers or a channel locks would work great. And on top of the oven, I have some aluminum welding rods, which are really soft metal, to be able to make a hook and hang your tool in the oven. Here I have a pliers that's been preheated in the oven. And I'm going to dip this again. Again, I want to dip and hold it at a certain height. Many times students will dip that too far, and it'll actually glue the two handles together. Notice I did not use any spray mold release. I do not want this to come off. I want this to stay onto my handles of my tool. After 2 minutes now, I'm ready to withdraw the tool from the dispersions. Again, we're going to wait until there's no longer any dripping, then I'll carefully return the tool to the oven. Plastisol coated tool handles serve multiple purposes. 1, I have extra grip. 2, I have insulation from electrical shock. So it makes a good use for a coating for some of your tools. I'll hang that back in the oven 15 to 20 minutes.